welcome to White Women Wake Up. I'm Jonelle.
And I'm Karen. We're your co-hosts, creating space for honest, open, and sometimes messy conversations about waking up as white women in a world shaped by privilege and cultural bias. Okay, Jonelle, I've got a question for you.
Okay.
My question, and I wish I was more explicit about it last time, but I'm going to do it this time. Have you ever struggled to accept a narrative that didn't fit your biases? What helped you shift, and what helped you shift your perspective? So we were going to talk about bias and perspective. That's what we were talking about last time.
That was our homework last time.
But I wasn't explicit in my question. I went back and kind of wrote the question out.
I think I gave us the homework last time.
Oh,
about
doesn't
bias.
matter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so wait, will you repeat the question?
Yeah. What have you struggled have you ever struggled to accept a narrative that didn't fit your biases? What helped you shift your perspective?
Ooh. This is interesting. I would say I have a couple relationships in my life that that we come at perspectives from two very different lenses. And I don't even mean politically, because there are definitely some things we align from like a political standpoint. And so it's not even that, it's just the way our brains think on a perspective. And so, but I don't know if that's a great example, because that's still within my own white bias. I don't know if
I think one of the things that we're trying to do is just notice.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Because I don't think you can make change until you start noticing things. Even it's like notice the language you use and so forth. So if there was a bias that you might have had, or you kind of had a perception of one thing and you realized that it was just shaped by your bias, how did that work, and what shifted your perspective?
Okay, so I have a story.
Okay.
That's interesting that you say this. So I think, and this is kind of like, haunted is not the right word, but it's something that I've thought about on a regular basis. A role that I was in, oh gosh, I want to say like 6 or 7 years ago at this point. We had a boss who was very all over the place. A little manipulative, but as most people know with bosses, you're trying to get on their good side. You're trying to stay in places. And one of my colleagues was Black. And I, because she was confident, because I didn't ever really think of her from a perspective. Basically, I was colorblind in those moments. It was more of the like, her and I are equals in this spot. I've definitely used my whiteness out of colorblindness of like, we're all on the same page, kind of thing. And so I don't remember what I even said to our boss, but I said something to our boss that put this coworker emotionally in a really tough place, like when she was presented to it. And I remember being shocked, not understanding her perspective at all. I mean, she did do the gracious thing that she did not need to do, but explain from her position and where she is coming at in life why this was, not a good reflection on me and my actions. And I'm so sorry, audience. I do not remember the details around it. I honestly still to this, I don't remember what exactly I said in a meeting that she was called out for. And so it really kind of did start a little bit of my growth perspective on how colorblindness is not
I can't wait to have
is
a
not an
conversation on
allyship,
that.
a thing on allyship, is not on. Yeah. And so there's still
you're not listening to someone's story.
And so recognizing that there are differences and understanding that. And I think the thing also for context of this team, it was a very multicultural team. Our boss's boss was, he was from Taiwan, and then his boss was from India. And then we had another coworker from Vietnam and so it was like a very multicultural like team. There was like 15 of us on it. And so I wasn't I wasn't understanding my privilege as a white woman in that space and how the things that I say really can affect other people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a big, interesting lesson on like bias.
And really kind of hearing that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. Mine, I feel really trite when I tell my story, but I think it can answer the second question, which is what helped shift your perspective. So I had a situation where I hadn't seen a friend in a very long time. I since talked to this person, hadn't seen them in a really long time, and they were living a pretty glamorous life with some glamorous people. So I had a bias in a lot of ways against them. Actually, it was a bias that they probably were a little snobby. They might act as if they're too good for me, and so it came a time when when we were going to meet up, and I was honestly really uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable with who myself would be showing up in this space because I had created an entire narrative around this person, given on how they presented themselves outwardly to the world. Oh my gosh, I was so humbled because this person is amazing. This person is kind and considerate, caring. I was like, it just, and I think what helped me shift my perspective is I actually just met the person. I went beyond like the stereotypes. I went beyond the like picture impressions. I went beyond the Instagram posts, and we just had a good conversation. We had good, and since then, this relationship is developing. And so that's kind of that. It's embarrassing and it feels really trite, but it was a bias and it was a perspective, and it did shift by getting to know more about that person.
Well, good. I mean,
yeah, I think in a lot of ways, this is what we're trying to do here.
Hopefully others can relate, or else we're just out there sharing all of our
deep, dirty laundry.
Dirty laundry, and
losing every friend available.
Everyone's judging us, and that's,
that's
okay.
Part of the authenticity.
That's part of the authenticity.
Okay, Jonelle, you're up today.
Okay, so oh
my gosh, I always get scared.
I know. I don't know why. I don't know why you get so nervous.
It's vulnerable.
I know it is. This is
it's very vulnerable.
This is very vulnerable.
Yeah.
So I was trying to do some research for a topic this week, and kind of, I mean, there's so much going on in the world. It's hard to pin down. So it's not like
there's so much.
Yeah. This topic is just an endless wealth of conversation. But I kind of stepped back a little bit. And I think this question will be good for us to talk out and for our listeners
to
hear us talk it out.
Okay.
And we'll see where it goes. So let me get through the whole question, and then
or the whole
kind of statement.
Yeah.
And
Jonelle has really taught me that I do need to give context. A lot of times I jump in. So context.
Yeah. So question is, are we, you and I, as white women, just soothing our guilt with this podcast? Or are we actually doing the work to dismantle our own privilege? And let me add some more. What if our attempts to help are actually reinforcing the very system of oppression we are trying to fight? What does real allyship look like to each of us?
Yeah.
And are we actually practicing it? Or are we just soothing our white savior guilt?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Jonelle.
You're welcome for opening that.
Because I have to say, everything you said, I could cry because it really resonates with me. Okay. I do know what I do know. So we're getting deep here a little bit. I do, and I don't know this universally because it's been good to be in the subject. Well, isn't that interesting? First of all, to be back in the subject, because that's one of my privileges as a white woman. I can jump into as a white cisgender woman. I can jump in and out of race, sexuality, all these just topics whenever I choose to. And so as we've been doing a lot more research, and we've been pushing ourselves to be in spaces that like reading different things, learning different things, I have really said, wait, is this, like you said, is this performative?
I think we both struggle.
Yeah, we're struggling. And one thing I do, first of all, I want to give a shout out to so many Black people, Latino people, Latinx people, Indigenous persons that are willing to be in the conversation with us white people. Because as I've learned in this conversation, they're done. Most of them are done.
Rightfully
They're
so.
done being traumatized. They're done, even transgender youth. It's like, let me just be me. I just want to like crochet. I don't want to have to like worry that you're thinking about me in a certain way, or just because you're Black, we have to have a conversation about Blackness. And so I totally, huge shout out. There's a Black woman who's doing a book study right now on white fragility.
Huh.
And God bless her, because I can't even imagine just being in that space. Because honestly, as you know, one of my big issues is my inherited culture in evangelical Christianity, and hanging out with too many evangelicals is really hard for me, because I just understand the damage it's done for me and the damage it's done for so many other people. So, I don't know, I'm probably rambling, but maybe tune me back in a little bit. So,
Okay. I can give you some of my kind of thoughts because this one hit me really hard. It was interesting where I was kind of looking into, white savior phenomenon on social media, and then it kind of started breaking down with something that we have had a continual conversation since we started this podcast. And my motto is, my goal is to not center white women, but it's really hard not to center white women on a podcast by two white women.
Yeah.
And so this is like where we're kind of towing the line and struggling. And so in an honest kind of unfolding here for everyone, context is, I think part of the journey of allyship, so that was in this question, is what does allyship look like? For me, allyship looks like growth and learning.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely something that I see that we're doing with this podcast even more than I realized.
Yeah,
I think
even if it's just you and I.
Yeah. Even if everyone stops listening to us, are you out there? But even if everyone stops listening to us, I think I have learned so much more than I ever even imagined. And this is only our 10th episode. We're excited, double digits, everyone. But like, I really thought, I kind of arrogantly thought I knew a lot and was going to be out there to teach white women. And I've learned already so much in this. And so I think like if we're looking at that, like one of my milestones of allyship is just doing my own research, learning, and having growth there. I definitely think that's a part that we're doing. I think the next step that we are still trying to figure out is then working to make a bigger impact on the community. Like, to me, that allyship. And so looking at like getting guests for us, I think the thing right now is we're trying to look for funding so we can pay those guests appropriately for time and knowledge. But the other thing that we're kind of starting to do, so you brought up that book club. We would love to start a book club with our group. But before we do that, we want to kind of join some, people of color's book clubs and see what they're about, see what they want to have.
We might be missing.
What stories might be missing, what stories there. And so like in my mind, I think where I wrestle with this is I know we have like so many well-meaning things that we want to jump into. But again, isn't that what this podcast is about? Is white women are well-meaning, but not like...
But we don't stay in it.
But we don't stay in it.
Yeah.
And so those were kind of some of my initial thoughts around, what does that look like for us?
And it's funny because we even feel that way a little bit, like the wake up shirts, because we really like them. We want to be able to have the conversations about waking up, and yet we don't want it to be performative activism.
Yes.
And so I think one of the things is, what's the goal here? What's the goal? And I think one of the reasons that we got involved, or that we're getting involved in this, is you and I end up having these really crazy conversations, either around the dinner table or around coffee or in the car. And over the years, they have been some really tough conversations.
Yeah.
And over the years, we've kind of expressed our different points of view with our generation, for our generation. Like I feel like some ways my generation, or at least my location and with my generation, might want to take some of this conversation a little bit slower and might want to not be so pointing fingers at myself, where your generation might, and this is again just presumptions, but where your generation is like, dude, let's get on this. We need to like really have these conversations. This is really serious. And so we're trying to figure out how to have, the real goal is how to have hard conversations, because we know nothing changes if you can't have conversations. If everything's just a sound bite and everything's just a place of contention.
Yeah.
We're not going to get to know each other, and we're not going to change.
No.
And I want my perspective to change.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, isn't that a great way to say that? Because I don't even going into this feeling like, oh, I'm very progressive.
Yeah.
And then how my opinions even changed on so many little things and continuing moving into different places. So I also think the thing that's like that you brought up is kind of like, what are our purposes around here? And some of my purposes, I think I have two that I would love, is one, education, and two, tactics. And I think education.
Yeah, you're much more on the ground than I am. Mine is really conversations, but go for it.
Well, but that's where tactic comes in. And so I do think like I'm hoping we're hitting an audience who's learning things and really
because we're learning a lot. I've learned so much just in the other 9 episodes.
Yeah, in the other 9 episodes. But so I think I'm hoping we're hitting an audience that's learning things and appreciating and taking that information to heart and evaluating it against other information that they have. But that's the goal, is education. But I also think it's interesting. I have a lot of friends who I've told that we're doing this. And of course, most people, when you tell them doing a podcast, roll their eyes a little bit like, oh, okay, that's a saturated market. And also with the name, I think people expect it to be like very
aggressive, much more aggressive, because it's definitely it can be aggressive. It shouldn't be aggressive.
No,
because we should be able to. In fact, I told my mentor, who's now 90 years old, that I was doing this, and she loved the name White Women Wake Up. I think that shout out to older women who are not afraid of telling it like it is. So, But so anyway, so I get a lot of friends who I think are kind of feel like some of our content is just watered down. It's not as forceful as they want. And so that leans into like, we want it to be at a space where people can kind of tangibly like absorb it in a meaningful way, I guess. And so it's not overwhelming. Well,
at the same time,
go ahead.
At the same time, though, then those friends who are finding the content might not be as in-depth as they want it. I'm hoping this is where the conversations and tactics come in. Yeah. And this is where I'm hoping, because I do think we get a lot of compliments as mother and daughter that we're able to have these conversations and not hate each other at the end. I mean, as you've said, we've had some tough ones over the years that have really kind of pushed our relationship to different depths. And so I think, and that compliments us that we're able to do this. And so I think we'd love to bring this to other people too, really showing them it's possible.
Yeah. Can I speak into that? Because I do think, when you talk about like the pace or the space of the conversation, I think originally, probably 10 years ago when we started talking about this, I probably shut down. I probably, because your pace was much more, you have more confidence. I mean, something about your generation, it exudes more confidence. Or maybe, again, I shouldn't say that about everyone, but that's my understanding. And so I think patiently over the years, your ability to stay in it, my ability to stay in it, allowed us to find a specific tempo that is working for us to have these hard conversations.
Yeah.
So can I speak into the conversation aspect again a little bit? I love that you're feeling good about tactics and feeling good. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
And we haven't really talked much about religion. We've talked a lot about culture and race and sexual identity. And as you know, I'm really religious. I'm in a small group where we meet every week. We're from all over the country, and we meet on Zoom. And we've been able to have really incredible conversations. And the word now is deconstructing, which is a weird word, but we've been able to really deconstruct our inherited culture, our inherited Christian white culture, and how it's challenged us, and how it may have hurt other people, and how it may have been exclusive and not inclusive, and how it may have not been a generous love. And with this, I've been meeting with these women regularly for 3 years and weekly. And in that conversation, I'm able to articulate. I've been learning how to articulate a much more generous approach to love. So the other day, I had this conversation with another colleague, actually, and they were describing the language of dualism versus non-dualism, and this is a big conversation in Christian circles, not living in a dualistic society, which is white and black, that we actually are much more fluid and there's much more in between. And so because I've been able to have these conversations with these women in a Christian setting, I was able to have a really great conversation with this colleague about their faith. And they may be more conservative than I am, but I was able to articulate how some of these things can trap us. So anyways, I just feel
it's about practicing is kind of what you're
really
saying.
Practicing
in a safe space.
Maybe that's my allyship, is how can we practice words around bias and perception and white supremacy and racism and not right away go right to defense, but actually speak into it. And then also listen to our friends with different perspectives.
Yeah.
I know you challenged me a couple weeks ago to listen to different news sources, or maybe I challenged you. And it's not been easy, especially with the recent things. Well, not recent, it's always this way. It's been really hard. And I'm trying to have a generative love. And I know love is a trigger word because it's not that everyone wants to love, but I'm trying to open my heart and
honestly, I feel like that those are tricky statements to say because what that does, it does. Yeah. I think it does invalidate.
Anyways, I'm trying not to go to judgment too quickly.
There we go. That's a better one because you don't have to love everyone, especially people who are doing harm by others. Yeah. But quick to judge.
Well, if our souls can connect, and so I think when you're doing, I know that's another topic, but there's soul work there, and so
sure,
Anyways, go on. So I loved your question. I think it's really wise that we kind of come together and share with our audience, like, what is their purpose? What is their goal? I apologize if it's perceived as white savior or performative, because that's not my intention. My intention is just to open up a safe space for white women to come to the table and actually talk about race and privilege.
And I don't know if it is being perceived as that, but
any of our biases.
But I think it's good for us to check ourselves is kind of my point, is check ourselves what our intentions. Okay, before we close us, I kind of want to do a funny little exercise to see.
Oh my goodness gracious.
So I've heard you can ask ChatGPT questions, and so I'm going to see what ChatGPT thinks about our white saviorness, and are we just soothing our podcast guilt?
Oh, and what did ChatGPT
I don't know.
Okay.
Typing right now.
Yeah. It's so funny. I've got, Jonelle and I are really doing good on research and things. I've got this great test that I'm going to have you take in a couple weeks.
Oh. Okay, let's see what
this is
ChatGPT says. I'm asking it, are we as white women just soothing our guilt with the podcast, or are we actually doing the work?
What if it says yes?
We'll see. Oh my God, it gave us a really long answer. Let me try to synthesize it. Okay. It says it's a tough question. And honestly, it's one we all need to ask ourselves repeatedly.
Yeah.
Thank you,
we are.
ChatGPT. We agree with this. The fact is, guilt alone isn't enough. It can feel good in the moment, but it doesn't push us to action. So guilt is only temporary. Oh, such a great thing. What truly matters is how we channel our guilt into meaningful action.
Yeah.
And so this is where I do think we are. Like, we are committing to stay with this. We're committing to next steps. Okay, there we go. With this podcast, you are trying to do the work, but it's essential that you never fall into the trap of performative allyship.
Yeah.
Where you talk and talk and talk and don't do the walk.
And don't
Thank
do the
you,
walk.
ChatGPT.
Yeah.
True allyship means consistency, examining our own actions, engaging in tough conversations, and amplifying voices with those that are impacted. And I think we need to do a much better job at really amplifying the individual voices. We talk about them as a collective whole.
Yeah.
But doing this work will change systems. Okay. And then it says, so are you just soothing your guilt? That's something that you have to continue to challenge in each episode.
Yeah.
And the real test is whether you're making space for others to lead and examine their own behavior and sustain actions that move the needle for real change.
Oh my gosh, this is great. Okay, we might go over a little bit, but I want to share a story because I think the language of guilt is really important. I remember, probably around 10 years ago, starting to do a lot of this work. And I was confronted by a person. We were looking at a hiring situation. I was confronted by this Black woman. And she questioned so many things about my perspective, about just so many things. And I remember owning so much guilt around just who I was. And I remember wanting to jump into the story and kind of say, but I can change things. I can do things. I can do things better. And I realized at that time it was just to kind of what was I performative acting because I was just trying to relieve my guilt around my past behavior, my past narrative. And so I do think you're absolutely right. Checking these spaces of guilt is really important. And so thank you. I mean, this was a good topic because it makes me want to cry because I think I just kind of feel it's really important. And I want people to talk again. And I want us not to be so divided. And I want us to stop doing this kind of horrific harm to those that are already experiencing so much shame and harm that is there a way we can do that with our words?
We want to wake up.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's so funny. Yeah, we want to wake up. Thank you, Jonelle. So thanks for joining us on White Women Wake Up. We hope today's conversation sparked reflection and inspired you to engage with the world more thoughtfully. Remember, this journey is about learning, unlearning, and showing up authentically. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe, leave a review, go on our website, and connect with us on social media. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay open, and keep waking up.
Waking up. Bye.
Bye.